My name is Laura, and the night before my daughter-in-law's scheduled delivery, she sent me one message. Please do not come to the hospital. Ryan cannot know I contacted you. Ryan was my son. I spent almost an hour feeling insulted before I noticed the photograph attached beneath her words. A locked suitcase, a bruised wrist, an envelope with my name written across the front. I was 47, and for a long time I believed the worst part of that year was my daughter-in-law pushing me out of my son's life. I was wrong. The worst part was discovering how many people around me had quietly agreed my pain was an acceptable price for keeping their own lives comfortable. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope, subscribe to Unheard drama stories, where the people who were ignored finally get to finish their own sentences. When Jade got pregnant, I promised myself I'd help without interfering. But Ryan kept me at a strange distance the whole pregnancy. Jade wanted privacy, he said. Calls went unanswered for days, and when I did visit, she seemed tense and watchful, waiting on his reaction before she'd even answer me. He told me she was just anxious, overwhelmed. I believed him too easily because he was my son. A week before the due date, he called and said no one was allowed at the hospital, including me. Then Jade's message arrived, and every excuse I'd made for him collapsed at once. Stay with me, because what I found inside that envelope changed how I saw my own son forever, and it happened faster than I expected. Inside were copies of her ID, a little cash, and a handwritten note. Jade wrote that Ryan controlled every bank account, tracked her location, kept her car keys locked away. He'd convinced her to quit her job once the pregnancy got hard, then started threatening full custody the moment she tried to leave. The bruise came from him grabbing her wrist over her own phone. Her final line read, "I need one adult who loves him to love the baby more than his reputation." My first instinct was to call Ryan and demand answers. Instead, I called a domestic violence hotline and followed their advice exactly. I sent Jade one neutral reply, asked what support felt safest, and quietly arranged a short-term apartment through a friend Ryan didn't know existed. I pulled up old messages where Ryan had asked me to send him money because Jade was, in his words, too irresponsible to touch the accounts. Every one of those messages looked completely different to me now. Ryan called from the hospital right after the baby was born, furious that Jade wouldn't let him into recovery, demanding I come calm her down. I told him I trusted the medical team and wouldn't interfere. "Jade poisoned you against me," he snapped, then threatened to take the baby home without her. I kept him talking just long enough to record it clearly and sent that recording straight to Jade's attorney. Jade left the hospital under a temporary protection order. I saw my granddaughter for the first time in the backseat of a friend's car, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Jade cried when she realized I'd come alone. Ryan showed up at my house the next morning, pounding on the door, demanding to search it. I spoke through the camera and told him to leave. "Mothers are supposed to protect their children," he shouted. "That," I told him, "is exactly what I'm doing." Police arrived after a neighbor called. He left before they reached the porch, but the footage became evidence at the hearing. My own relatives reacted as if I'd chosen a stranger over my son. My brother told me marital problems should stay strictly between husband and wife. I asked him plainly whether locked bank accounts, ongoing threats, and grabbing a pregnant woman's wrist counted as marriage customs he genuinely wanted to defend. Some family members simply stopped calling after that. Others quietly admitted Ryan had always needed to control the story of every room he was in, something I'd spent years mistaking for leadership, simply because I loved him. Love had made the evidence painful. It had never made it invisible. At the temporary custody hearing, Ryan claimed Jade was suffering postpartum instability and that I'd been manipulating her the entire time. Jade's attorney laid out the bank restrictions, the tracking records, the wrist injury, the hospital safety plan, and my own porch footage. The judge ordered supervised visitation and a full custody evaluation. I testified. Ryan wouldn't look at me until I described, out loud, the calls where he mocked Jade's fear to my face. Then he stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Maybe I had. I was no longer the mother who translated his behavior into kind language. I was simply a witness. "How could you do this to me?" he asked outside the courtroom. "This isn't something being done asterisk to asterisk you," I told him. "It's a response to what you already did with your own power." Jade stayed in that apartment 4 months before finding her own place. I helped only when she asked, never treating my help as a claim on the baby. Ryan entered a court-ordered program, at first only to help his case, but slowly he started owning specific things without adding, "but Jade," to the end of every sentence. The first time Jade placed my granddaughter in my arms, she said, "Thank you for believing the evidence before you believed the role." I've never forgotten that. Ryan and I speak only in structured settings now. He knows I won't carry messages, won't criticize Jade, and won't help him bypass a single court order. After a year, his visits became unsupervised for limited periods. The court's decision, never mine alone. I love him. I don't fully trust him. Both are true at once. My granddaughter is 3 now. Jade has her own job, her own home, her own life completely separate from Ryan. I've apologized to her more than once for every time I accepted Ryan's version of her without ever asking what she was actually living through. Trust came back slowly, through showing up on time, respecting the word no, never once reporting her location to anyone. The yellow blanket from that first night is still folded in a drawer at my house. It reminds me that the real gift I gave my granddaughter wasn't the car seat I'd bought so proudly months before. It was choosing not to warn the one person she needed protection from. A boundary, I've learned, isn't a punishment. It's simply information about what access to you actually requires. Parents say they'd do anything for their children. The harder question is whether we'll tell the truth about them, even when it threatens the identity we built raising them. Loving my son never meant helping him stay dangerous. Accountability wasn't abandonment. It was the only kind of love that actually left room for real change. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been made to feel selfish for protecting yourself, remember, love does not require you to disappear. Subscribe to Unheard Drama Stories for more.